Hey everybody, we made it to season 23, which has no theme, so it's kind of a free-for-all. So hit like, subscribe, leave a comment, do whatever you want, just be safe. Not long ago, I made a list of 10 criminals with the worst nicknames, like the grocery bag killer or the giggler. On the list was the Taco Bell Strangler, and though his nickname is terrible, his crimes were horrific. He terrorized the city of Charlotte, North Carolina for 2 years before finally being brought to justice. This is Monsters. Before we begin, I just want to make sure you know that my other show, Sinister, is back up and there are 3 episodes a week. They're dark stories from history, and if you like this show, you'll probably like that one. Give it a shot. There are links in the description. Thanks. Henry Louis Wallace was born on November 4th, 1965 in Barnwell, South Carolina to Lottie Mae Wallace. His father, a married schoolteacher, abandoned the family upon learning of Lottie's pregnancy. That absence created a fundamental void in his early development. The small, battered home he shared with his older sister Yvonne, his mother and great-grandmother lacked basic amenities like indoor plumbing and electricity. The family struggled financially throughout Henry's formative years, even though his mother worked tirelessly at a local textile mill. That economic hardship shaped many aspects of his childhood experience and contributed to the household's constant tension. While other children in Barnwell enjoyed relatively normal upbringings, Henry's early life was marked by material deprivation and emotional turbulence that would later surface in disturbing ways. Lottie's relationship with her son was complex and frequently troubled. Working long hours at the textile mill to support her family, she had little patience or emotional energy left for her children. Many accounts describe her as an exceedingly harsh disciplinarian who employed both psychological and physical punishment. She constantly criticized Henry for even minor mistakes, creating an environment where he could rarely meet her standards. She would call Henry stupid, dumb, or a son of a bitch, sometimes even telling him she wished he was never born. In perhaps one of the most disturbing parenting practices, when Lottie felt her children needed discipline but was too exhausted to administer it herself, she would make Henry and his sister fetch switches from the yard and then whip each other. That unusual and traumatic punishment method likely contributed to his later issues with power and control. Moreover, as Henry outgrew his clothes, his mother would give him his sister's hand-me-downs to wear, an unusual practice that may have contributed to confusion and ridicule in a small town where everyone knew each other's business. A psychologist would later testify, quote, "Throughout his entire life, Henry paid for the wrongs that had been done to his mother by the men in her life. She made him pay through a process of control, abuse, and intimidation. It started during the earliest stage of his development and continued through his adult years." The household was additionally strained by constant arguments between Lottie and her own mother, creating a multi-generational cycle of conflict. Surprisingly, given his troubled home life, Henry managed to create a positive social identity at Barnwell High School. In contrast to his home environment, he became well-liked among his peers. He was elected to the student council and, when his mother prohibited him from playing football, he joined the cheerleading squad instead. In his senior year, he was even put in charge of driving a school bus to take some kids to and from school. After graduating in 1983, Henry briefly pursued higher education at South Carolina State College and later at a technical college, though he completed only 1 semester at each institution. Instead, he seemed more drawn to his part-time work as a disc jockey at a local Barnwell radio station. Many townspeople knew him for his seemingly positive spirit and the kindness he showed around town. However, that promising career path was cut short when he was fired after stealing CDs. Behind the veneer of normalcy, troubling behaviors were already emerging. According to some accounts, Henry witnessed a gang rape at age 8, which he later claimed triggered violent fantasies about dominating women. By 16, those fantasies had manifested in behavior when he allegedly attempted to sexually assault a friend's younger sister. He would later tell an investigator that he started reading his mother's detective novels that would usually include a victim that was a woman who was stalked and murdered. Psychologists believe he picked up a lot of ideas from those stories. With nothing left to keep him in Barnwell, Henry enlisted in the U.S. Navy at the age of 20. Military service initially appeared to provide the structure and direction his life had previously lacked. By most accounts, Henry performed well in his duties, receiving positive evaluations from his superiors. One report read, quote, "Henry was described as an outstanding seaman who willingly followed all orders given to him and accomplished his assigned tasks in a timely manner. It was noted that his knowledge level was higher than expected of a seaman." Through his career in the Navy, Henry would serve on the USS Nimitz and the USS LaSalle. He was promoted up to an E4 or Petty Officer 3rd Class, but was demoted to E3 or Seaman after being charged with burglary. That same year, Henry married his high school sweetheart Moretta Brabham. That union represented more than just a marriage. It thrust him into the role of stepfather to Moretta's daughter. For a brief moment, it seemed Henry might be establishing a stable adult life, far removed from his difficult childhood. Unfortunately, that period of apparent normalcy proved short-lived. His marriage quickly deteriorated and ended after just a few years. The relationship's failure marked yet another unsuccessful attempt at building a conventional life. Beneath the surface of Henry's military career, troubling behaviors began to emerge. In 1987, while stationed in Seattle, Washington, he allegedly committed his first sexual assault. His criminal activities soon expanded beyond that, though. Military officials discovered Henry had been involved in a series of burglaries around the Seattle metropolitan area. Those weren't isolated incidents, but rather the beginning of a pattern that would continue throughout his time in Washington. In January of 1988, authorities arrested Henry for breaking into a hardware store. Several months later, in June, he pleaded guilty to second-degree burglary and received a relatively light sentence, 2 years of supervised probation. Yet Henry demonstrated little respect for the legal system's leniency. According to his probation officer, Henry routinely skipped mandatory meetings. Concurrent with his escalating criminal behavior, Henry developed a severe substance abuse problem. Shortly after his marriage, he began using various drugs, ultimately becoming addicted to crack cocaine. His growing dependence on the highly addictive substance necessitated a steady stream of money, pushing him deeper into criminal activities to fund his habit. His burglary spree continued unabated. In February of 1991, Henry broke into 2 places with personal significance: his former high school and the radio station where he had once worked as a DJ. After stealing video and recording equipment from those locations, police caught him attempting to pawn the items. The following year brought another arrest for breaking and entering. Remarkably, despite his criminal record, Henry's military service record remained sufficiently positive. So much so that he received an honorable discharge from the Navy when his criminal activities finally forced his separation from the service around 1990. Upon his discharge, Henry returned to South Carolina. His life continued its downward spiral as his wife left him, forcing him to move back in with his mother and sister, who had relocated to the Charlotte-Mecklenburg area. That period marked a critical juncture in Henry's life as he struggled with increasingly severe drug addiction, unstable employment at various restaurants, growing financial pressures, and deteriorating personal relationships. Throughout that time, Henry managed to keep his drug problem hidden from his family, and they would only learn of his addiction shortly before his eventual arrest for murder. That combination of addiction, financial depression, and psychological issues created the perfect storm that would soon erupt into a series of brutal murders across Charlotte, transforming Henry Louis Wallace into the notorious Taco Bell Strangler. After his marriage ended, Henry tried to date a woman named Tashonda Bethea. Their families had known each other for most of their lives, though Tashonda was 7 years younger than Henry. He used his mother's car and offered her a ride as a means of spending time with her, and they became close. One evening they did kiss, but 18-year-old Tashonda declined to go any further with Henry. Henry backed off, but inside he was angry, and he quietly planned to get revenge. In March of 1990, Henry saw Tashonda walking to a high school baseball game and asked her if she wanted to ride. He then drove her out to a wooded area where he sexually assaulted and attempted to strangle her. When she came to, he tried to strangle her again, but then slashed her throat and wrists with a box cutter. After that, Henry dumped her body in a lake where it remained undiscovered for several weeks. The autopsy revealed water in her lungs, which indicated that she was still alive when she went into the water. Her parents filed a missing persons report, and multiple people said they saw the young woman with Henry that day. Although police questioned him about her disappearance and death, they never formally charged him with the crime. They had searched his car but couldn't find any evidence, as Henry had thoroughly cleaned it after the murder. The day that Tashonda's body was found, the mother of a 16-year-old in Barnwell filed a report with the police. Eartha Brown had told her mother that Henry Wallace had held a gun to her head and tried to sexually assault her in a hotel room days earlier. She said she wouldn't stop screaming, so Henry ended up stopping his attack and took her home. Henry was arrested and held for 8 days before being released without being charged. At the beginning of 1991, Henry was questioned in 2 more sexual assault cases. One was a woman who worked at a doctor's office and the other a 14-year-old. He wasn't charged in either case. After a short stint in county jail for burglary, he decided he needed a change of scenery and moved to Charlotte, North Carolina with his mother and sister. After relocating to Charlotte, Henry's violent tendencies resurfaced in May of 1992 when he picked up Sharon Nance, a 33-year-old woman with a history of drug dealing and sex work. When she requested payment for her services, Henry beat her to death and left her body next to the railroad tracks near the 5800 block of Rosellas Ferry Road. Her body was found a week later. Just 1 month afterward, in June of 1992, Henry claimed his third victim, 20-year-old Carolyn Love. She was not just any victim, though. Carolyn was his girlfriend's roommate, and the women worked together at Bojangles restaurant. Henry had gone to his girlfriend's apartment and was there alone when Carolyn arrived home. She wasn't worried because she knew Henry, but soon he attacked her and put her into a chokehold. Then he dragged her into the bedroom and sexually assaulted her before strangling her to death. He wrapped her body in sheets and dragged her out to his car, then dumped her body in the woods. Like a true sociopath, after murdering her, Henry joined his girlfriend and her sister in filing a missing persons report. Her body wouldn't be discovered until March of 1994, nearly 2 years after her murder. The connection to fast food restaurants, especially Taco Bell, became a defining characteristic of Henry's murders. He had a difficult time maintaining a job and worked at a variety of fast food restaurants. Those establishments would be where he found a number of his victims because, unlike many serial killers, Henry only killed women he knew personally. It was his employment as a manager at a local Taco Bell that ended up giving him his nickname, as he worked there the longest. Throughout 1993, Henry's killing frequency increased dramatically. On February 19th, he killed his first coworker from Taco Bell. 20-year-old Shauna Huck was a college student who worked at the Taco Bell where Henry was her supervisor. The two had become friends and were hanging out one evening watching television when Henry later described, quote, suddenly getting that feeling. He forced Shauna into the bedroom and sexually assaulted her. Then he forced her into the bathroom where he choked her out. In the bathroom, he filled the bathtub with water and placed her in to wash any fibers off her body. Then he pushed her head under the water until she was dead. She was found the next day by friends. In an act of extraordinary callousness, he subsequently attended her funeral. Her murder would go unsolved for a year, during which time her mother wrote a letter to the killer that was published in the media. It read, quote, "Dear Killer, I am the mother of Shauna Denise Hawk. I am writing to you because you murdered my only daughter in our home on February 19, 1993, between the hours of 1 p.m. and 5 p.m. It is so hard to believe that an entire year has gone by since that horrible Friday evening when Shauna's dead body was discovered in the bathtub where you put her. I do not hate you. What purpose would that serve? I do want you to come forth and confess to the horrible atrocity you have committed. D. Sumter." His next victim came 4 months after he had killed Shauna on June 22nd. That was when he sexually assaulted and strangled 24-year-old Audrey Spain, who worked with Henry as the manager at a different Taco Bell. His attack of Audrey was not just about the sexual assault, though. He also wanted her to open the safe at the restaurant because he believed she had the code. He went to her apartment and the two smoked a joint and talked for a little while before Henry jumped up and put Audrey in a chokehold. He then threw her to the floor and demanded the safe code. Unfortunately, Audrey also didn't know the code, so Henry dragged her into the bedroom where he sexually assaulted her. Then he used some clothing to strangle her to death. Then he laid her on the bed and found some of her ex-boyfriend's clothing and placed them near the bed. He pulled some of Audrey's pubic hairs and put them in her ex-boyfriend's clothes to make it look like he had been the attacker. He turned the AC on to keep her body from decomposing too quickly and even returned to her apartment to make some phone calls to make it seem like she had still been alive then. After not showing up at work 2 days in a row, her boss called and even went to her apartment but got no answer. She called the police, who also knocked but got no answer. It was a few days later that the apartment maintenance finally entered the unit and found the body. On August 10, 1993, Henry sexually assaulted and murdered Valencia Jumper, a 21-year-old college student from South Carolina who was friends with his sister. After strangling her, Henry set fire to her body in an attempt to make it look like she had died in an accidental fire. Once again, he attended the victim's funeral, even sending condolences to her family. Of course, the medical examiner found no soot in Valencia's airway, but he still listed her death as accidental, so her death was not investigated further. September brought yet another murder as Henry attacked Michelle Stinson, a 20-year-old college student and former Taco Bell colleague. In a particularly horrific twist, he sexually assaulted and murdered Michelle in front of her oldest son. Henry left Michelle dead on the floor with her children still in the apartment. The following day, a friend stopped by and found the body with the two young boys fending for themselves. By the beginning of 1994, Henry must have believed he would never get caught, and his killings became more frequent. On February 20th, he raped and strangled 25-year-old Vanessa Mack, whose sister worked with Henry at Taco Bell. He tried to have a sexual relationship with her previously, but she turned him down. Then she got pregnant and moved away for a while, but when she moved back, they reunited. One night, Henry was at Vanessa's apartment when he began strangling her and asked her how much money she had in the bank. He demanded her bank card and PIN, which she gave to Henry. Then he sexually assaulted her before strangling her to death. Her 4-month-old baby was in the apartment, and Henry would tell the authorities that he sat with the child until they fell asleep and then left. He tried to use her bank card at 3 different ATMs, but the PIN she gave him was fake. He made sure to keep his head down so the camera wouldn't see his face. The following morning, a relative found Vanessa's body in her apartment. March of 1994 became the deadliest month in his murderous timeline. On March 8th, Henry killed 2 women at the same apartment complex in a single day. First, Henry sexually assaulted and strangled 24-year-old Betty Jean Bauckham, who was a co-worker of his girlfriend at the local Bojangles restaurant. When he left, he stole Betty's car. Then later the same day, Henry returned to the apartment complex where he sexually assaulted and strangled 18-year-old Brandy Henderson. She was the girlfriend of one of Henry's best friends. Yeah, great friend. Henry strangled Brandy while she held her 10-month-old baby, then he tried to quiet the screaming child with a bottle. When the baby continued crying, he attempted to strangle him with a towel. Fortunately, the child survived. Charlotte's police chief didn't recognize that they were dealing with a serial killer until early March of 1994, after 3 young black women were murdered within 4 days. By then, Henry had already claimed most of his victims. The investigation suffered from a lack of information sharing among detectives who rarely discussed cases with each other. That siloed approach meant obvious connections were missed. Most victims were strangled in their homes with no signs of forced entry, indicating they trusted their killer. It wasn't until March 12th that investigators all shared notes and realized that some of the victims knew each other, and they finally started realizing that every woman had some connection with Henry Wallace. They had either worked with him or his girlfriend or had dated one of his friends. Then they found Betty Bockham's car and they lifted a palm print from the trunk lid, which came back as a match for Henry. Unfortunately, the police would not be able to arrest Henry soon enough, and he was able to kill one last time. On March 12, 1994, Henry claimed his final victim, 35-year-old Deborah Ann Slaughter, another woman who had worked with his girlfriend. She fought back fiercely as Henry sexually assaulted, strangled, and stabbed her 38 times. Henry took $40 from Deborah, and after killing her, he went out and bought crack. Then he went back to her apartment and smoked it in her bathroom. He hadn't slept in 3 days and was in rough shape when he left. He was paranoid and thought the police were following him when he went to a friend's house. On March 13, 1994, police arrested Henry hiding in the bathroom at his friend's home. During a 12-hour interrogation, he confessed to murdering 10 women in Charlotte plus his earlier victim in South Carolina. His devastating timeline of violence had finally come to an end, leaving behind a city in shock and multiple families forever changed. The police were harshly criticized for taking so long to connect the cases and stop Henry's killing spree. Indeed, the Charlotte Police Department faced significant resource constraints. The department was severely understaffed, with about 6 homicide detectives handling a record-breaking number of murders. In 1993, Charlotte Mecklenburg set an all-time high of 132 homicides. Following Henry's arrest, the department implemented crucial reforms, including adding more staff to the homicide unit, establishing mandatory regular meetings for homicide detectives to discuss cases, creating a crime analysis unit to identify patterns, and developing better protocols for victim-family interactions. The Charlotte police ultimately apologized for not connecting the murder sooner, yet maintained the varied nature of the cases threw them off Henry's trail. Henry's trial finally began in September of 1996 after 2 years of delays involving venue selection, DNA evidence disputes, and jury selection complications. In opening statements, prosecutor Marcia Goodenow pursued the death penalty, while defense attorney Isabel Day requested life imprisonment, arguing Henry suffered from mental illness. Day insisted the murders weren't first degree because they lacked premeditation and deliberation. Psychologist Faye Sultan testified that Henry had endured lifelong physical and mental abuse from his mother, resulting in severe mental illness at the time of the killings. She advocated for life imprisonment without parole instead of execution. Contradicting that assessment, FBI profiler Robert Ressler described Henry as disorganized yet calculated, saying, quote, "If he elected to become a serial killer, he was going about it the wrong way. Mr. Wallace always seemed to take 1 step forward and 2 steps back." On January 7, 1997, the jury found Henry guilty of 9 counts of first-degree murder. His conviction included 8 counts of first-degree rape, 1 count of second-degree rape, multiple sexual offense charges, and 5 counts of robbery with a dangerous weapon. Henry Wallace received 9 death sentences, plus multiple consecutive life sentences and 40-year terms for his additional crimes, and is currently still on death row in Central Prison in Raleigh, North Carolina. Though seemingly charming and helpful, Henry exploited personal relationships to commit unimaginable acts of violence against women who trusted him. His methodical approach, building connections through workplace environments before targeting victims, demonstrates the calculated nature that made him particularly dangerous. Arguably, Henry's crimes reveal as much about systematic failures as they do about his own depravity. Law enforcement missed critical connections between murders for nearly 2 years while bodies of young black women accumulated across Charlotte. Their deaths might have been prevented had detectives communicated effectively or recognized the pattern linking victims to Henry's employment at Taco Bell. At the end of the day, it's another story of a charming monster gaining trust and taking life. Fortunately, Henry was finally caught as it's claimed he was planning to move back to his hometown where he could have continued to go unnoticed for years. Instead, he was locked up for good. Thanks so much for letting me tell you this story. If you're a fan of true crime, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss an episode. You can also hit like or leave a comment. If you'd like to support the show, check out our merchandise at thisismonsters.com. The link is in the description. Thanks again, and be safe.